You need to define what your success metrics are because, for example, if you are podcasting to get new clients, then the number of downloads that your show gets doesn't matter as much as the number of client inquiries that you get from the show. So you need to define that success, and you need to define what those success metrics are for you so that you can track the metrics that actually matter rather than the ones that you think should matter, the vanity metrics like download numbers. Welcome to Imperfect Action. I'm Steph Taylor. For years, I read all the books, downloaded all the freebies, and did all the courses. But it wasn't until I started taking imperfect action that my business had its first $1 million year. Imperfect action is about doing things before you're ready, prioritizing consistent action over perfect action, and moving forward, even when you're not sure you're doing it right. On this show, you can expect mindset advice, actionable marketing tips, and strategies to build a business that brings you more profit, more freedom, and even more joy. Are you on the list to get my daily Biz Boosters? Every day, I'll send you a bite-sized prompt designed to help you grow your business in a more intentional way. Sign up at stephtaylor.co/DBB or at the link in the show notes. Hey, welcome back to Imperfect Action. This is episode 697. Today, I'm talking to any wannabe podcasters out there. If you are thinking of starting a podcast, today's episode is for you. I've been doing this whole podcasting thing for a little while now, coming up on 5.5 years. And I also accidentally helped to launch hundreds of new shows when I created my A to Z podcast launch plan. Now, I've watched all of these other new podcasters come out. I've been through all of the ups and the downs of podcasting. And I've realized there are a couple of key things that you need to know before you jump in and start your own podcast. I've come up with 9 key things. There might be a few more than that, but there's 9 that I think are really the most important key things to think about and to know before you just buy a microphone and hit the record button. Okay, number 1, the first thing you need to know before you start a podcast is no, there aren't already too many podcasts out there. This is something that people have been saying for the last 4 years, 5 years, and yet that number of podcasts has still kept on growing, and there have still been so many new shows that have been incredibly successful. Now, depending on where you look and who you ask, there is anywhere between 2 million and over 4 million podcasts out there. Now, not episodes, shows, right? Not individual episodes from each podcast, but actual podcasts between 2 million and over 4 million. But here's the thing is most of those shows have not released more than 10 episodes. Most of them fizzle out in the first couple of episodes. I don't have the exact stats with me, but I was recently at Podcast Movement in Denver, and Rob Walsh was talking about, so Rob Walsh works for Libsyn, which is one of the big podcast hosts. And he was talking about how in reality, you're not competing against 4 million other shows. You're competing against 300,000 because those are the only ones that are actually active. Now, don't quote me on that number. I can't remember exactly what number he said, but it was around that number. Now, here's the thing though. You're not going to stand out just because you have a podcast. It's not like, oh, I've started a podcast and now because I have a podcast, people should come and listen to it. Instead, you need to still be asking, should this be a podcast, right? Is this topic that I'm going to talk about, should this be a podcast? And I'll get to that in a second. But first, number 2, the second thing you need to know before you start a podcast is you don't need to have figured out every single topic that you are going to talk about before you start your show. It's really easy to think oh, how am I going to keep new ideas coming up? How am I going to come up with more ideas beyond the first 10 that I have right now? And here's the thing, your show and your content and your topics are going to evolve organically over time, just like how this show has. What I spoke about in the first 100 episodes is so completely different to what I talk about right now at nearly 700 episodes. Okay? I used to talk about Instagram and social media tips and all of those little things. And now I talk on a much deeper level about business, strategy, mindset, because I have evolved. I've learned a lot. And as I learn new things and have new ideas, I come up with new ideas for episodes. I have more knowledge that I can teach. So you will not know all of the things that you can possibly talk about in the future right now. And that's okay. You will have new ideas that pop up. You don't need to have every single one figured out. Okay, number 3. Now, this one relates to what I talked about earlier, right? Should this be a podcast? So number 3, you do need to be able to articulate why someone should listen to your show instead of somebody else's show. Yes, a podcast is free to listen to, but you still have to sell somebody on it because they have a finite amount of time that they can spend, and they can choose to listen to your show on their commute in the morning, or they can choose to listen to somebody else's. So why should they care about yours? And a huge mistake that I see happening all the time is not being able to articulate exactly who your show is for and why they should choose to tune into yours. And another big mistake is somebody will go and start a podcast and they'll be like, oh, I've been listening to this show for years, this other show, and I really like the format. I really like the guests, and they've grown to be really big. So if I emulate that format and I bring on some similar guests, then my show will be successful as well. But if you are emulating that similar show, then why should somebody choose to tune into yours when they could tune into the one that they are already familiar with the hosts that they already like? Okay, so make sure you know exactly what is making yours different. Also, please don't start a podcast just for the sake of starting a podcast. You need to have a really clear idea of why you are doing it, who it's for, and why they should listen. Otherwise, you're not going to stick with it if you don't know why you're doing it. If you can't connect back to that why, you're not going to stick with it because guess what? Just like every other fun, shiny thing that you do, at some stage it's going to get boring. It's going to become just another task on your to-do list. And if you can't remember why you're doing it in the first place, then you're not going to keep with it. If you can't articulate who it's for, then the right people aren't going to know if it's for them and they're not going to listen. And if you can't articulate why they should listen, then they're going to choose to listen to somebody else's show instead of yours with that limited amount of time that they have. Okay, number 4. You probably won't see massive growth really quickly, and that is very, very normal. You need to be willing to commit to it for 3 to 6 months without seeing much traction. Just like anything new in your business, it's going to be at least 3 months minimum investment before you start to see some kind of traction from it. You also need to know what success means to you. Okay, you need to define what your success metrics are because, for example, if you are podcasting to get new clients, then the number of downloads that your show gets doesn't matter as much as the number of client inquiries that you get from the show. So you need to define that success, and you need to define what those success metrics are for you so that you can track the metrics that actually matter rather than the ones that you think should matter, the vanity metrics like download numbers. And then you can see, am I getting a true return on my investment, a true return on my time that I'm putting into this from doing this podcast? Because if you only have 100 downloads, but you're getting 5 client inquiries, then who cares that your download numbers are really low because your client inquiries are really high, and that's the number that really defines success to you. So you need to know what that is. And I can't tell you what those success metrics are going to be. It's going to be unique to you. It's going to be unique to your business goals, to why you are starting this podcast in the first place. Number 5, you need to make it as easy as possible for yourself. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard to stay consistent. Now, I see a lot of people jumping in, and from day one, they're like, cool, this is going to be a podcast. I'm also going to do the video. It's going to go to YouTube. I'm going to slice it up. It's going to become short form, which is going to go to YouTube Shorts, TikTok, and Instagram Reels. And then it becomes this huge mammoth process that's really difficult and really time consuming. So rather than trying to do video from day one, if that's really difficult for you and you don't have a team to support you like I do, then maybe just keep it simple and start with audio only until you have that process figured out. And then you can add a little bit more, and you can add a little bit more. You can plug in all the different pieces rather than trying to do everything from day one. Keeping it easy also means repurposing. So can you turn each podcast episode into a blog post? Or can you take little snippets from your podcast episodes and turn those into Instagram captions? You need to make it really easy to come up with content ideas. So maybe you need to sit down once a month and brainstorm all of those topics. Maybe you sit down once a month and you record all of those episodes for the month. Whatever works for you to make it easy for you to be consistent, that is going to be the right way to do it, rather than looking at what everyone else is doing. And if somebody's telling you to batch, but your brain just does not work in batches, like I kind of struggle with batching. The only time I will do it is if I'm going away, if I'm going to be offline for a while, or if I'm traveling for a while, then I will batch record a bunch of episodes before I go. But otherwise, I actually find it really challenging to sit down and record more than one episode in a day, or more than 2 episodes in one go. So you need to find what works for you. Otherwise, if you are consistently having to work against yourself, you're going to find it really hard to be consistent with your content. Okay, number 6, the novelty will wear off. And that is not a sign that you should stop doing it. If you are feeling a little bit bored, if you're not enjoying it as much as you were at the start, that's not a sign that you need to stop doing it. Just like anything, it is going to be fun. It's going to be shiny at first, but after a while, it is going to start to feel like just any other task on your to-do list. There are going to be times when you are like, oh, I really just don't feel like doing this. You know, I have that as well. Like nearly 700 episodes in, I have times when I absolutely love it and I have so much to say and I have more than enough ideas for new episodes. And then I have times when I'm in a bit of a creative rut and I just have no inspiration, no ideas, and I just don't feel like hitting the record button. It's okay. There's going to be those ebbs, there's going to be those flows, but when you commit to it, then you do it consistently. I'm committed to showing up 3 times a week with these episodes, so I force myself to do it, even when I don't feel like it. And I know that those times when I'm not feeling inspired, those are going to pass. It's not a sign that I need to stop the podcast. It's not a sign that I should skip some episodes. It's just a normal creative energy thing. You can't always feel inspired. You can't always feel excited. You're going to have those days where you feel great, and you're going to, or weeks or months where you feel so inspired and so great and so creative. And then you're going to have days, weeks or months where you don't want to do it, and you got to force yourself to do it. Okay. Number 7, your microphone doesn't matter as much as you think it does. And that goes for any of your equipment, your mixer, any of the bits and pieces. I have a really great microphone now, but for like the first 100 or so episodes, I used a really cheap, terrible microphone. And it was only when I was at Podfest conference in Orlando back in 2019 and I won a spot prize. I won my wonderful Rodecaster Pro and Rode Pod mic simply by being seated in the audience at the right session and answering a question that somebody asked. I won this microphone that is a pretty expensive microphone and mixer. But until then, I was just using a really cheap microphone because the content of your show matters so much more. I think, yes, once you get to a certain point and you've got a certain number of episodes there and you're really starting to grow, then sure, production quality becomes a bit more important. But I think at the start, and I know so many podcasting experts are going to be like, no, Steph, you're wrong. But I think at the start, the content matters so much more. And I proved that with my own show. Like the sound quality was pretty average at the start. Average to terrible, actually. It wasn't great. But because the content I was consistently putting out was consistently good, that is how the show started to grow. So don't go and buy the best microphone until you know that you actually enjoy podcasting and that it's something you are going to stick with in the long term. Okay? Try just getting started. Try putting content out there. Try and figure out what works, what you like, what you don't like. And then once you know this is something you want to do longer term, then go and invest in something a little bit more expensive. Number 8, don't get too caught up in the things that can be changed. Things like your cover art, your show name, your description, all of those things. They can be changed pretty easily, right? At the end of 2022, we rebranded this show. It used to be called Socialette. If you scroll back far enough, you'll notice that all of the episodes, when I'm introducing them, I'm welcoming you back to Socialette podcast. But after 4 years of podcasting, I decided, actually, you know what? The name doesn't suit the content of this show anymore. I want a new name. I want a new cover art. So we rebranded it, and it was actually relatively pretty easy. So don't get too hung up on the things that can be changed. Like as James Clear, I think it's James Clear who said this, if a decision can be reversed, make it quickly. If a decision can't be reversed, make it slowly. most of the decisions that you're going to be making when it comes to starting a podcast can be reversed really easily. I actually can't think of any that can't be reversed. So don't get too caught up in all of those things. Don't let them stop you from getting your show out there, because the thing that's going to help you to succeed with it faster is getting content out there, seeing what lands, seeing what sticks, seeing what you enjoy, and then tweaking based on your feedback that you get from that. Okay, and then number 9, lucky last, it's probably going to feel a little uncomfortable, and that is really normal. When I first started out, I wasn't a confident speaker. I hated my voice. I didn't think there was any way I could be a successful podcaster, but I just did it. And podcasting taught me to like my voice. It taught me to become more confident speaking. It has taken 700 episodes of practice to get to this particular episode. And I know when you're starting out with something, it's really easy, really tempting to compare your episode 1 to somebody else's episode 100 or 500 or 1000, forgetting that you are a beginner and they have been doing this for a long time, and it takes practice. It takes those repetitions to build that mastery. And the sooner that you start, the sooner you can get practicing, the sooner you can start to put those reps in, and it's going to have that great ripple effect onto your confidence, onto your speaking, onto your business. It's going to make you feel a lot more comfortable showing up, because now you feel a little bit more comfortable expressing yourself and articulating yourself. So there you have it. 9 things that you need to know before you start a podcast. Number 1, there aren't already too many shows out there. Number 2, you don't have to have figured out every single topic that you are going to talk about before you start your show. Number 3, you do need to be able to articulate why someone should listen to your show instead of somebody else's. Number 4, you probably won't see massive growth really quickly, and that is normal. Number 5, you need to make it as easy as possible for yourself. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard to stay consistent. Number 6, the novelty will wear off, and that is not a sign that you should stop doing it. Number 7, your microphone doesn't matter as much as you think it does. Number 8, don't get too caught up in things like the cover art, the name, or the description. Any of those things that can be changed really easily. And then number 9, it's going to feel uncomfortable, and that is normal. Now, if you have learned anything from this show so far, whether it's this episode or previous episodes, I really would appreciate it if you could take 30 seconds to leave a quick rating and a review. I read all of them. They get delivered to my inbox every Tuesday morning, and I read them and they bring a smile to my face. So if you haven't left one yet, please do. It reminds me that there are actual humans listening to this show, and it's not just me talking into a microphone. Believe me, when you start your podcast, you will understand just how important ratings and reviews are. So please do take the time to do that. That is it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Catch you next time.